Hello, here we go again with episode 10 of the Sanibel Chronicles. Don't forget that these episodes of the Chronicles in the coming weeks will be bi-weekly. I'll have this one this evening, and then 2 weeks later we'll have part 2 of this series. The series was generated because someone made a comment wanting to know more information on 3 topics, and these topics were the Sanibel Slough, the Sanibel River, and the water control structures that regulate water levels on Sanibel. Those are three interesting historical aspects that I'll tackle in one episode at a time. And I've taken the opportunity, at least for these next 3 presentations, to colorize some of the older photographs just to give them a little more pizzazz as we move through the series. First of all, the first image is a popular map of Sanibel Island produced in 1833. Now, the history of this map is rather unique. I recall many years ago sitting on the city council when a couple from New York came to a council meeting and brought 2 prints of this map, announcing they were going to go ahead and do a serial limited edition print of this map. And we, the city council, endorsed this project, and I believe their run was 300 prints of this. And I really didn't like it. It was, I guess it was too antique-y looking for me at the time. But the series sold out very, very quickly, and it became a collector's item. And the prices eventually to collectors for the originals got up to about $300 each. And they have been reprinted. And the one in this image is a reprint that years later I acquired and hangs in my living room. I've sort of adapted it to my mental capacity to like it. So I'm going with this to discuss the earliest map of Sanibel Island. This map was produced by a group of New York investors who were going to develop Sanibel back in 1833. And they started, but hurricanes, problems with Seminoles during the Third Seminole War brought a pause to the operation, and it sort of dwindled out into the history of the region. The best suggestion I can make, and I'm not pushing anything, if you're interested in this early history of Sanibel, and I can get into the more specific units of this later, but Betty Anholt and I did a book 2 years ago. It's titled Once Upon the Island Known as Sanibel, and it covers Sanibel history during this period and back beginning in 1513 all the way through until the 1980s. So the island shape is rather unique. It's unlike other barrier islands in Florida and along basically both coasts of the U.S. that run or are positioned north and south. The configuration of Sanibel Island is east and west in a bending shape. And this is geologically caused by a mass of bedrock that runs between 17 and 35 feet below the surface where Sanibel's positioned. And over the past 5,000 or 6,000 years as Sanibel developed, that configuration of bedrock gathered sediments and slowly built up the island that we know today in the same basic shape as it was in 18. This image is a profile of the way Sanibel was geologically formed. It's an artist's rendition to show the characteristics of why Sanibel Island is unique. On the bottom part of the diagram, you see the Gulf side of this landmass is indicated. On the right side of the image, the bay is shown, as is sea level. And the dark area is a freshwater lens. It's a unique situation because of the dip in the elevation, the lowlands that are produced by that site where the freshwater lens is indicated. Beneath that is a impenetrable layer of clay and marl that retains the fresh water. As I said, or will say later, is produced only by rainfall in position. And beneath that, beneath the clay and marl substrate, is a substrate of ancient limestone rock, which of course is porous with voluminous amounts of salt water. So that lens of fresh water is the surface water aquifer of Sanibel Island, and it rises to, or did originally rise to flood elevations, and in time, if there was sufficient rainfall, just ordinary rainfall without tropical storms or hurricane, it may not reach in that particular year the same level as it did during flood stage. But what happened at flood stage is what we'll be discussing in the next installment, and that'll be about the Sanibel River. The island is blessed with the fact that it's rather basin-shaped. On the Gulf Beach, we have what is called the Gulf Beach Ridge, and where Sanibel Captiva Road traverses through Sanibel, that's the Mid-Island Ridge. And between those two ridge systems is a basin. It's a wetlands. It's a miniature Everglades, if you will. In the early years, during its early development, and up until the early 1900s, it was a grassy savanna, very few trees, only on the Mid-Island Ridge and the Gulf Beach Ridge. The rest of the vegetation in the basin, or the Sanibel Slough, as it became blasted. The grasses that were so common in the basin of the Sanibel Slough were spartina, and that's still growing in the wetlands of Sanibel, although the entire ecosystem of the Sanibel Slough has drastically changed over time. In 1888, Sanibel was released for homesteading, and farmers and homesteaders came to the island, and they began to cultivate the land. And this illustration is a 1908 photograph of the interior of Sanibel, the margins of the wetlands, and this shows a very productive crop of watermelon. The next image is the post-farming appearance of the slough. Farming had stopped after the 1926 hurricane. It came to a halt because of saltwater intrusion. And farming waned, and the savanna-like grasslands returned, and it went back to its more primitive ecosystem. This next image is an aerial photograph of Sanibel in 1936. You can see the island. There's very little development visible. You can see at the very eastern end, the right-hand end, you can see the clearing of the Sanibel Lighthouse Reservation property, but nothing, no other living areas or habitations, buildings are very much visible in this photograph. It had returned in the 1930s to much like it was in the latter part of the 1800s. The next slide, a 1952 aerial photograph. It is taken at the central part of Sanibel. The road that runs north and south near the center is Tarpon Bay Road. The slough has changed dramatically. And if you look at the very lower end of this image, you'll see where Tarpon Bay Roads comes to the beach. And if you look to the right, along the beach, you'll see the Casabel Hotel, now called the Casabel Resort. And I guess at this point I should point out that I pronounce it Casabel because when I came to Sanibel, all of the locals called it Casabel. Casa-Ebel is not the original pronunciation of the resort. So Point Ebel at the lighthouse, and my connotation is still Point Bell. The Y was not used, it was silent. Is the same photograph, but I did point out the Bailey Tract. You can see the small dike system that still is in the Bailey Tract. The Bailey Tract was developed by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service a couple of years before this photograph was taken. And I'll be getting into the Bailey Tract relatively soon as I progress with these episodes. Then the next photograph identifies within the Sanibel Slough an area that was developing into an open waterway, and that's identified by the arrow. That waterway was not continuous through the entire slough. Now the slough originally, the eastern end of it was where the Colony Resort is now located on the eastern end of Sanibel. And that ran all the way west, curving around to the north, about as far north as Chateau-sur-Mer subdivision on the Gulf. I want to thank you for joining me tonight. The subject of the next episode will be about where the Sanibel Slough often morphed because of rainfall and became the Sanibel River. The only source of water for the Sanibel Slough, the Sanibel interior wetlands, is precipitation, rainfall. There are no springs. There were, during its lifetime, other sources of water, and I'll touch on those when I get to the Bailey Tract episode. I want to thank you for watching, and I've certainly enjoyed talking to you again, and I'll look forward to seeing you in 2 weeks. Thank you.